Today I discuss the summary of Walden by Thoreau in first chapter. In his first chapter, that is named Economy, Thoreau introduced his purpose in writing the book, saying he intends to answer questions people have asked about his reason for living alone in a cabin in the woods near Walden Pond for 2 years. He explains that most people live their lives as if sleeping blindly, following the way of their parents, and become trapped into these lives by owing poverty and slaving in jobs to maintain their way of life. In contrast, he sought to discover the true necessities of life and build a cabin for the cost of $28.12 near Walden Pond, where he lived for 2 years, beginning in the summer of 1845, making a profit of 8.71 by selling the beans he grew and working occasionally at odd jobs. He found he was able to support himself with very little work and much time for contemplation of himself and nature. So, Thoreau in the second chapter, where I lived and what I lived for, talks about how he once considered buying the Holloway farm for himself, but the purchase fell through. Instead, he created a new existence for himself at Walden, where he found joy and fulfillment in nature, truly awakening in his morning there, while most of society remains perpetually asleep, lives when the possibility of a much better life is possible. The key of achieving such a life, he says, is simplicity. In the third chapter, Reading, Thoreau describes how he derives enlightenment from reading Homer and other great writers, men who spoke of the truth and speak of life in terms too noble for most to understand. Most of society, however, is not content to strive after such truths and instead waste their time reading popular fiction and newspaper when they should instead be dedicated to improving the intellectual culture, making the village of Concord become a university. Okay, however, as the Thoreau relates in the fourth chapter, Sounds, he spent his time during his first summer at Walden hoeing beans rather than reading or sitting all morning watching and listening to the birds. That revive is broken by the whistle and rumble of the passing train, which reminds Thoreau of the destruction of nature and country life by progress and industrialization. In the evening, the hoots of the owls makes him melancholy, reminding him of human cries of sorrow. In the fifth chapter, solitude, Thoreau feels so much a part of nature that he scoffs at the suggestion of one of his townsmen that he might be lonely at Walden. Instead, he relates his distaste at village life, where people see too much of each other so that human interaction becomes trivial. In the sixth chapter, Visitors, Thoreau is pleased that those who would bother him with trivial matters don't visit him at Walden. Instead, his visitors are Canadian woodcutter, whose straightforward thinking and love of life please Thoreau. Other visitors include half-wits from the almshouse, who Thoreau thinks are more intellectual than most overseers, and men of business who no longer really enjoy nature. The happiest people to visit the pond are children and young women. In chapter 7, the bean field, Thoreau describes how he hoed and tended 2 acres of beans, some of which he sold for a profit of $8.71, though passing farmers criticize him to not using a bow of plow or fertilizer. Having to work so long and hard made him grow close to the soil, truly enjoying his work rather than seeing it as a means of profit like most farmers. The eighth chapter, The Village, recounts Thoreau's discomfort in visiting a town every few days where people stares and thirst for gossip are invasive, and where the attraction of pubs, store, and shops are a temptation. He is always revealed to return home to his cabin, but worries that society will seek one out whether he goes. One day he went to the village to go to the cobbler and was arrested for not paying tax to a government which supports slavery. He spent a night in jail. The experience would prompt Thoreau's essay, Civil Disobedience. Living in the woods, Thoreau devotes his time to experiencing nature as he describes in chapter 9, The Pond, sometimes fishing with a elderly man who is hard of hearing, and sometimes floating about in his boat playing his flute. He gives detailed descriptions of surrounding bodies of water: Flint's Pond, White Pond, Goose Pond, and Fairhaven Bay, but finds Walden with its pure clear water to be the epitome of nature's offerings. In chapter 10, Baker Farm, Thoreau describes a visit to go fishing at Baker Farm. When caught in a rain shower, he takes refuge in the heart of Irish Boger Johnfield and his family, though he tries to conceive failed that simpler easier life could be attained with far less work. A field cannot conceive of such a possibility. When the rain stops, he even does extra work to catch fewer fish than Thoreau. In the book's 11th chapter, Higher Laws, Thoreau describes a feeling of animality that occasionally comes across him, making him want to devour woodchuck raw. He sees in himself dwelling impulse to animality and to spirituality, and seeks to strengthen his spiritual self, refraining from hunting or eating meat. He hopes that boys who hunt will grow to be men who appreciate nature on spiritual level. Chapter 12, Brute Neighbors, open ends with a dialogue between hermit who represent Thoreau's contemplative nature and plot and poet who tempts him to abandon his meditation and fish instead. He goes on to describe his animal neighbors, including including friendly mice and partridge, as well as a war he witnessed between red and black ants and a loon who he followed around the pond in his boat but could never catch. Chapter 13, Housewarming begins. Thoreau's description of the winter months as the weather grows colder in October and November. He builds a chimney and plasters the inside of his walls. When the ponds freeze, he studies the bottom of the lake and the formation of ice bubble within the ice itself. In the 14th chapter, Former Inhabitation and Winter Visitors, nature is all about silence and snow prevents Thoreau from venturing out much. He instead reflects on the former inhabitants of the woods, including former slaves Cato, Ingraham, Zilpha, and Brewster, and Fenda, Freeman, and Iris Hag Kuel. Only a few remains of their house, chimney, stone, and covered wells remain. Sometimes Thoreau ventures out of work, one seeing a seemingly inactive owl who sadly flies away and returns home to find visitors, including a farmer, a poet, and a peddler philosopher. In chapter 15, Winter Animals, Thoreau describes looking at the transformed landscape from the centers of lake and seeing it in a new light, and hearing animals, including owls and fox, chased by hounds. One day he sees a rabbit which looks miserable to him until it leaps away, clearly a strong and worthy part of nature. In chapter 16, The Pond in Winter, he awakes one morning after a night of questioning to realize that nature is serene and asks no questions. He cuts hole in the ice of Walden, measuring the depth of the pond, uh, which some people have called bottomless. In January, Irish labourers working for a rich man arrive to cart away the ice to sell. This upsets Thoreau until he realizes people all over the world will have a taste of Walden. The lake soon refreezes. In chapter 17, the chapter name is the Thaw. The lake gradually begins to crack and groan and break apart. Thoreau describes in great detail the sand which breaks through the snow and flows like foliage down the banks of the railroad. The birds begin to return and the trees become greener. Soon summer comes, and after 2 years at Walden, Thoreau leaves. Uh, in his conclusion, Thoreau explained he left Walden because he had many more lives to live. He urged his readers to turn inward on immense spiritual journey of self-discovery, to find fulfillment in nature rather than riches, and to avoid conformity and live his own life as he must. He concludes with the story of a bug which emerged from the wood of a table after 60 years and hopes that human beings will likewise awaken and emerge into a new life. That's all about the Walden. It's a so much sweet and great story, that from that we learn so much things. So that's all about the I say wall. Sorry, the story about the Walden, or the touch up of the Walden by the Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau.